Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to get into another 3D interference video on disconnecting from labels. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit more into depth on some of the things that I've touched upon in different workshops, lectures, podcasts, interviews, and a little bit in my books. And I'm just going to go through a little bit more in depth the characteristics of certain labels and how they can be perceived and as setbacks, but in reality, they're beautiful spiritual gifts. And I'm going to go in one by one just to make it very clear and precise so people can truly connect and try to discern and understand for themselves. So I'm going to go into autism. I'm going to go into ADHD. I'm going to go into Asperger's. I'm going to go into dyslexia, and I'll bring up a few other topics. So for those of you that know me, I've been talking about this for a while, and this is one of my, one of the things that really is I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about disconnecting the use of labels because as we are learning throughout our journey of our awakening collectively and individually, whether you have a child affected by these labels or not, or you yourself have been labeled at one point in your life. I mean, more and more adults are being labeled than I've ever seen, certainly in my lifetime so far. So the labels are certainly a 3D interference, and I'm going to explain to you why I think that's true, and a lot of the information that I'm gathering or that I've gathered over the years is personal information, people that I know, friends and family, but also probably 75% of it are from client sessions to the children and the parents that I work with over the years. So in all different age groups. So first I want to talk about how we have an influx of starseeds coming into the planet. I've explained this many times, and starseed is an ambiguous term. It simply means that at our origin, every single person walking on the planet that's not an NPC, not a plug, not a clone, not just put here in the matrix to dim us and to push narratives and agendas. The starseeds are at origin, we are a consciousness. We are vast. We are infinite. We have had millions of lives in different places, not even on just this planet. And so when we talk about starseeds, I believe most people are starseeds, even those that are not awakened. Those are the ones that are blocked and then they've forgotten who they are. And so over many, many lifetimes, thousands and thousands of years, as the 3D has become more prominent and more strong, and it's really captivated a lot of high frequency beings within it over time through genetic modification and many, many other factors, such as all the 3D interference that I talk about in my most recent book and many other things. It has altered our ability to tap into our multidimensional aspect of ourselves, because in reality, we are interdimensional beings, much like many of the deemed mystical creatures that are fictitious, right? And that we read about in books or we see in movies, when in reality, they are not fiction, but they are out of our reality. So in fact, they could be perceived as not real, when they are interdimensional beings, just like we have the capacity and the ability to do that as well. So where do I want to start with this? So the starseeds that have been volunteering to come in for thousands of years, but let's say collectively for hundreds of years, and even more specifically within the last probably 75 years, we have a massive amount of already ascended star beings from many places, including inner Earth and on this planet, but also many other places, coming in to volunteer to descend, meaning lower their density of consciousness. And really that's not even correct. They are limiting their ability of consciousness by coming in through a human form, which in and of itself is limited because of a lot of the dormant DNA that has been deactivated, but also knowing that they're coming in to a matrix of 3D, third dimension, with limited density of consciousness, and all the interference and all of the programming and all the manipulation and all the things that make their limited consciousness makes their potential of their consciousness to be limited. So they know that ahead of time, and they come in as anchors of light, as grid workers, as healers, as way showers, as the innovators, the mentors, the people that are different. Now, back in the day, they would call them black sheep and the conspiracy theorists, but I think we see that terminology changing now as a result of many different things, and it's turning into more of the awakened ones, the light workers, the way showers, the star seeds. So the terminology is shifting a little bit because people are starting to realize that those odd ones out were actually onto something, and they were different for a reason, and they were tapping into an innate abilities and knowings that this reality was not conducive for enlightenment. And they knew that from a very young age and have been ridiculed. Many of us have been ridiculed our whole life, or been like, oh my God, she's so crazy, he's so weird, all the things. And many of us have lost family members. We've been laughed out of town. We have been decredited and lost licenses and all sorts of things. I work with a lot of people who have lost their license to practice medicine and so many other things, and lost the ability to teach at prestigious school universities. So a lot of that is flipping, and we know that our reality has been inverted, so we have to reorient, and we're shifting things back around. So these starseeds come in with altered abilities, with heightened psychic abilities, with different frequency bandwidth, different wavelength that comes in. And when that happens, the physical body has a difficult time acclimating or integrating. That's why starseeds come in waves. I've talked about this many times. We have the indigos, the crystals, the rainbows, the stars, and they all come in a different frequency bandwidth or resonance that is that our physical bodies have an ability at some point to adapt to a higher frequency to come in. So therefore, higher frequency beings can come through. Not that, like for me, example, I'm a low frequency being and I only made the cut for indigo. It just means that I volunteered to come in that wave, knowing that I would have a density of consciousness abilities for a certain period of time throughout my life, and then they would become activated. Whereas the children that are here now have way more than I and many have ever had, and then the ones being born are going to have even more than them. So it's just a matter of what we have volunteered to what we volunteered to have as far as limited I can't speak limited abilities, characteristics, our qualities. But with all of that, there's side effects. So when we talk about the labels, that is what the 3D interference, the players that were, the dark ones, all the words we want to call for them, we want to call them, they've known that there are waves of star beings coming through to help enlighten, to help be a positive influence, to bring compassion back into the collective, to bring love back into the collective, to remind us about how we are being divided and programmed and indoctrinated, and to, perhaps look in a different direction or try different things or think for themselves or try this, try that. So they're going to play defense as much as possible. If anything, they're also playing offense in many ways because they see these things coming into the future. So they're offensively going to make moves 20, 30 years prior to prepare so that by that time they've counter their moves are so dominant that they have in fact derailed a lot of the light workers movements in the past. I believe that the labels are one of those things. So as the collective has the ability to bring in more high frequency beings from all over the world, they have to come in as children. Well, they don't have to. Some are walk-ins and they'll step into grown bodies, which I've talked about. But specifically, we're talking about the new wave of children that has been coming in, the new waves of children. And every wave seems to bring in more energy, more light, higher frequency, higher depth of knowing, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result of that, the side effect in the 3D is that the physical bodies sometimes there's a disconnect between energies. They don't know how to interpret the energies coming through the light that soul carries with them. So there's a lot of miscarriages in the past, a lot of different developmental disorders, and things like that has caused limit. I don't know why I can't say that word today. Limits in our abilities to function physiologically and mentally and emotionally and many other things. So yes, there are things that alter the frequency. I have to be very careful about my words. So I'm just going to say, the V word that we have been getting since, childhood, And yes, that does play a factor in these labels. There is a dark side, but there's always a light side. So yes, the dark side is that there are toxins in our environment, in our food, in those things that we get, and they only have gotten worse as the generations have, the newer generations and what they've been able to put in them, the things up in the sky, all of the things that most of you already know about, and I don't have to really explain that. But there's also another side to the labels. So when we go into the labels, really what they are these children exhibit behaviors, abilities, and also lack certain normal behaviors and abilities that we have deemed as society as normal, appropriate for certain age groups or developmental stages. So anything that's not within the confines of the box that the powers that were have determined that is what is normal and what is acceptable, they have to create another box for it. They have to create another category. There has to be something wrong, because if they don't fit in the box that they have created, and that box follows a trajectory. We've talked about it. The trajectory is indoctrination through school. So they usher children through school in the indoctrination camps, or whatever you want to call it, of programming, manipulation, memorization, regurgitation, follow the leader. They lose their light and they go down this trajectory. And then as adults, young youth, they go into the universities, even more layers of that. And then they go into a career, and then they just follow the person in front of them, the 9 to 5, the repetitive redundancy of this reality. And then you have some fun on the weekends, you drink, you party, then you do it all over again. And we do that till we die, as we make lots of money for them. You guys know the story. So anything that doesn't align with that vision, they're going to create a new pathway for them. But that's there's something wrong with them. Those are disorders. That's dis-ease. There's something wrong with them. We must medicate them. We must fix them. We must separate them from the other children. And we create this stigma. And we have been seeing this for 30, 40 years. And the numbers have only gotten higher in the statistics of the labels that we use. Why is that? Yes, these are definitely increasing, but we also have more starseeds coming through. And one thing that people don't like when I say is that there are a lot of arguments out there that there are no children labeled that have not had these. I'm going to say it again. There are people who have arguments that I dare you to find one person that is labeled, one child that is labeled, that never had any childhood Ds or the V word. And I am here to tell you that that is actually not true. And I personally have countless clients that have never done that with their children, because they awakened at some point, or they just had a knowing, or maybe they did one or two and then they didn't do any more. But I have a lot that never have done anything, and their children still exhibit strong signs of those labeled criteria. And so that's not actually true. So that just goes to show you that there is another explanation for it. These are heightened abilities. These are actual gifts. These are starseeds coming in with different qualities that don't fit inside that box, because they're quite expansive. But when you're trying to integrate those children into a 3D reality, into a 3D school system, into the 3D paradigms of what's normal, what's not normal, developmental stages, what the doctors are saying is good, is okay, and the teachers are saying is not acceptable or is acceptable, that's where the trouble comes in, because they're not taught that in medical school, and the teachers aren't taught that. So it's not necessarily their fault. But the level in which they buy into it, I believe to some degree, it is their responsibility to have some common sense and wake up a little bit. Same with the teachers, which many have. Many of them are pulling back. They are retiring out. They're saying, I've had enough. I'm not going to do this anymore. This isn't right. So I want to go through, I have my notes here so I don't forget what I want to talk about. So let's go into autism first. So autism, or autism, spectrum disorder, ASD. So it's referred to as a developmental disorder or neurological development disorder. So the common symptoms of autism are poor eye contact. And I'm going to go through these one by one, but I'm going to tell you why. So the poor eye contact, the reason they don't look at you, they don't want to look at people, not even their parents, not even their siblings, nobody, is because they see through through our reality. They see beyond it. They're interdimensional. So they see people's demons, they see people's auric fields. I equate it when I do lectures sometimes, and I talk about how, imagine if we had the ability to see everybody naked all the time. And we don't want to see that. So it's like we see people beyond their physicality. They see their demons, they see entities, attachments, they see their intentions. So if they are not a good person, or they're lying about something, or they're not honest, or maybe they just have distorted, scattered energy, they have a lot of anxiety. And so it's not always a bad thing. It's not always that the child is seeing a demon behind the child, the adult or another child. Sometimes it's just overwhelming. They're overstimulated when they look at the person because they see too much, and they shy away. They don't want to see it because they break eye contact, or they don't look at the person, and maybe they look beyond the person at the trees or whatever's behind them or the wall. Then they feel like they can calm down. It's not overstimulating. It's not overwhelming. And the first child to ever tell me this was many years ago. And I asked the child, why do you not look at people? And he said, I can see their demons. And I just was shocked by the answer in the moment. But it made so much sense. And I've been told that so many times since then, that it has to be a real thing, that it's an explanation that makes a lot of sense. So there are a lot of children that will refuse to look at people's eyes, and to take it further, they don't want to interact. They don't want to hug on Uncle Sam, or somebody makes them feel uncomfortable. So if we push it, and we push them beyond the boundaries of what they feel comfortable with, we are teaching them to not trust their intuition. We are teaching them that they have to listen to someone else outside of themselves. And sometimes they're afraid, or they don't have the ability to explain to mom, but I don't want to look at him or her. They scare me. Well, why? Because I see these demons behind them, or I see their field is distorted. Like, they don't even have the words sometimes to describe it. They just say, I don't want to. And then sometimes the adults will say, well, that's not good enough. So that's a lot of what comes into with the autistic spectrum, of the spectrum. Now, it's hard to use the word spectrum, because autism and these labels are not a linear. It's not linear. There are so many categories, which is why it's funny to me that they try to create these categories, and they keep creating more categories and subcategories, because not everyone fits in this one category. And that's because they're dynamic. You can't put them in a category. So you're going to keep creating hundreds of categories, and at some point it's going to get confusing. And I think it already is. But if you think about it, autism, for those that have learning disability, or are on the less functioning side, or have a really difficult time being a human in general, they tend to be more right brain. So they're more creative, they're more imaginative, they're more multidimensional. So they're going to be seeing things that other people don't see. They have more compulsive behavior. Sometimes they're a little bit rude. They're brash, and that's because they don't relate necessarily to our social cues, our norms of recognizing that maybe what they're saying might be hurtful to somebody else, or you've taken it too far. They can also seem sometimes to be very selfish, self-centered, like the world revolves around them. But truthfully, like, they feel that way. Like, this is my human experience. This is how I perceive the world. This is what I need. This is what I require. This is what I want. This is what I know. This is what I don't know. That's it. So I don't believe they're trying to be rude or difficult. They just they are not 3D enough to notice, or have been ingrained the social norms of the cues, and what to pick up on, and all of those things. Many of them, this is their first life. A lot of these starseeds have trained 50 to 100 human years in order to even come here, because this is their first life. Maybe they've had less than 5. So there's a lot of factors that they're just trying to not only acclimate to a human body, but they're also trying to tap into our limited awareness. They're overwhelmed because they can see much more, and sometimes they don't adapt to our physical body, and so they don't walk properly, or how we would say properly. They have repetitive movements because they have so much energy coming in, they can't sit still. So they have to do things to make them feel, many of these children need an anchor. For whichever category they fall into, they need an anchor, something to make them feel like they have control, that they are safe, that they have the ability to just kind of take control of their environment. So they need an anchor. So sometimes repetitive movements help them to feel like they've got a grip on things. They're sensitive to sound, touch, too loud noises, because they hear it much stronger than we do. They hear the vibration attached to it. They hear things that we don't even hear. They hear the voice of God technology and all of the electromagnetic frequencies and all the sounds and radiation and sonar and all of these things that actually have a sound, but we don't hear. We're not tuned to it. They can hear it. So it can be very overstimulating. The colors can be very bright. Sometimes their eyes are sensitive. They're sensitive to taste. They're sensitive to touch, the way that the ground feels when they walk on it, or if they touch sand. A lot of this is new to them. So they're trying to figure out like how to integrate. And sometimes they just may not like it. They don't like the way that feels, or the way that sounds, or the way it feels when they touch something. Sometimes they get so out of sorts that they might harm themselves or others because they get so energetically charged. They don't know how to release it. They don't have a way to release it. So they start hurting themselves. They start hitting their parents. That's just them like, hey, I'm having trouble here. I don't know how to say it to you. Some could be nonverbal. And so they're trying to get it out. They're trying to figure it out. Some of them have anxiety. Many of them have anxiety for the reasons of everything I just said. They're overstimulated. They're overwhelmed. This reality is harsh. There's a lot of different personalities. They're trying to figure out where they fit in, especially when they get to school age and they see all the other children and how they interact. Some of them will be great followers because they're like, let me just follow what other people are doing and they'll be very submissive. But then others might be a little bit more dominant and assertive and say, oh, I don't like that, and be very outspoken about it. So it's just, again, you can't categorize them into one way because there could be very drastic changes in behavior based on the type of starseed that they are, and how many lives they've had, etc. Some of them have so much frequency of light coming through that their body literally short circuits, and they have epilepsy, or they may have one seizure at different points because they have surges of energy coming through where they're integrating more light. And as that occurs, they have an activation. But the physical body, the physiological response is alert, overwhelmed, overstimulated, short circuit, many different ways to describe it, and they'll have a seizure. Sometimes it's just one episode and then they never have it again. It could be an activation. But some that are epileptic and have it quite often, it's their body is really having a hard time withstanding the light that wants to come through. Some of these children, many of them actually, have only integrated a certain percentage of their energy into their body. I work with some children that have they only have 25% of their essence in the body, 35%, 50%, 80%, some much lower. Those that have epilepsy tend to have much lower integration because their body just can't hold their frequency. So they have to be very careful of how much their light comes through. So it's very interesting. Unusual eating habits has to do with many things. One, they are not used to eating where they come from. I've had there's people who can't swallow. They don't understand the concept of swallowing. They've been a light body for so long. Now they're a physical being. They have to figure out how to eat, how to chew, how to swallow. They don't like the texture, the taste of certain things. And then I've had children that will only eat applesauce. I've had children that will only eat rice. I've had children that will only drink milk. They're 5 years old. I mean, you name it. I have probably worked with somebody who has struggled with it. So they are, their body is more crystalline than ours, so they will get a lot of their nourishment from the sun and the atmosphere. So their skin is permeable the more crystalline we are. So we will absorb more light and nourishment from the light, and they have a way less of an appetite. Some of them refuse to eat. And so it's kind of a battle of what the physical body needs, but what they feel that they need. And again, it's an integration process. Generally, it doesn't last forever, but parents, they just have to work with what it is that they'll tolerate. And some of them will just want only to drink. Some of them will only have crackers, and they were white crackers, saltines. We have to understand the reason why. They're just trying to figure out how their body can process and what it needs, and also what they're capable of accepting. Unstable moods, again, for the reasons of everything I just said. They're uncomfortable. They don't know how to articulate what it is that they want, what they need sometimes. So they get agitated. They have severe emotions. They have outbursts. They can be quite challenging sometimes. And that's because they are high frequency beings, many of which feel like they are way more evolved than us, and they do not like being children. That's why we have such a high rate of reverse walk-ins. I talked about that in a couple lectures and in my recent book, where they come in, they have a kind of a surrogate soul come in for the first period of the life that they've chosen, first 2 years, first few months, first 7 years. There's not a average. It's just kind of whatever the soul wants, because they want to bypass the beginning years. They don't want to be a child at all. Like it's like the worst thing for them, because it's hard to communicate. And so some of them are nonverbal. Some of them are purposely coming in not wanting to speak because they don't want to participate in the word spells. They know that our words have spells associated and dark meanings behind them. So they refuse to use our words because they're not going to, they're not going to consent to that. They're not going to participate in calling in certain demonic energies when they say certain words. So there's that. Some of them have a hard time even saying our words because, again, they are used to nonverbal communication where they're from, telepathy, communicating energetically. Maybe they speak in tones or clicks or melodies. I talked about that in my book, that I think the light language is the true universal language of sound and vibration, and that's those sounds and vibrations carry an entire message, a download within it. And our 3D reality purposely broke those beautiful harmonies into segments, which we call words, to make it to limit our ability to communicate fully and impactfully. And then there's misinterpretations, and the words don't fully express how you feel. Where these starseeds come in and they're like, this is not that's not the word that I would choose. This is limiting. It doesn't make sense. So there's that. And then there's also a lot that are choosing to be nonverbal to teach the collective how to interact and how to connect telepathically and emotionally and energetically on a much more on a much higher level, on a much more intimate level. So they're teaching us how to communicate nonverbally. And it starts with the home and the teachers and then the other children. And 90% of children who are nonverbal, when you put them together, they have no problem interacting with each other. It's just harder for the adults. But they're teaching us to turn off that left brain and really tap in and connect with them in a more profound way, because I believe that's where we're headed at some point. I had one girl tell me many years ago, by 2030, the collective, not that we'll be nonverbal, but it will be more normalized, where we will telepathically communicate with each other. Like it's a normal thing, just as much as we would talk, but we will be communicating many other ways. Sometimes they have difficulty connecting or making friends, and that's because they just have trouble relating to other people. They don't know how to be, they don't know how to act. So a lot of them are observers. They'll look and they'll observe. They'll try to insert themselves. And then again, they don't follow the social cues. So sometimes they can be perceived as annoying. Sometimes they walk on their tippy toes, or they run and they flap their hands, or they might walk funny, or carry themselves a little bit differently. Again, they're just trying to figure out how in the heck they can walk appropriately in this environment. They're trying to adapt to the density, the heaviness of the body, how it feels to walk in shoes. Many of them hate shoes. Certainly, most of them hate socks. They don't want to even feel confined. Many of them don't even want to wear clothes, no underwear, like nothing. They don't want to brush their teeth. They don't have good hygiene, because again, they are not used to it. So they have to adjust. So how can you possibly check all of those boxes for every child in the exact same way and have one label for it? We need to get rid of the labels and just accept that they are different, and they are coming in through their own resonance of spiritual gifts. So these are the downsides I don't even want to say that. These are the side effects or the challenges that they have that require these labels. But the beautiful part of it is they're imaginative. They think outside the box. Some of them are quite independent. They have deep intuition. They see what we don't see. They have the most beautiful ideas. They have the best energy, the lovely energy. They're loving. Many of them are just so sweet. Even though they can be, have bratty behavior and can talk back and feel and act very like rude in their behavior, they're at the same time, they can be the most sweet and gentle, loving, kind, nurturing type of people. So they are here to just promote new pathways, new ideas, not so rigid, not so, follow the person in front of you. Perhaps we can lighten up a little bit, not maybe it's okay if we don't all walk in the exact same way. Maybe it's okay if some of them dance around when they walk, and that's them showing the beauty of living and just being in the moment, being in the present moment. Asperger's is more of a right brain. I'm sorry. Asperger's is more of a left brain syndrome, or whatever the word is. It's part of the spectrum, but it's more of the high functioning spectrum, high intelligence spectrum. So some of the so their autism symptoms might be milder in some case, like they're more functioning. With autism, also, there's the autist collective. I'm going to quickly say, but I've already talked about this. The autist collective is the severely disabled, limited, like they don't speak. Many of them have feeding tubes. They can't walk. They are on the severe side. And that's because they've chosen to keep themselves out of the body as much as possible and only integrate small aspects, like less than 20%, just enough to keep the body alive and functioning, but not functional. And that's because they want to remain connected to source and God and their collective to help, well, for many things. It's too much to say here in this video because I've already talked about it, but they are grid workers, they are healers, they are just bringing in light, but they don't want to anchor themselves in the body. So as we go to the Asperger side of the spectrum, they are the highly intelligent, more functioning, but they also have limited abilities as well. So they have narrow range of interest. That's because they are very hyper-focused. So many of them are architects, engineers, innovators that come from Alpha Centauri, Sirius, A and B, the Pleiades. I mean, they come from everywhere, where really it's not just those places, Andromeda, but they come in on a resonance or a wave of energy that's going to help with technology or many different things, and engineering, ingenuity, all sorts of different things. So they're highly intelligent. They're very smart, but they get hyper focused. They need to focus on one thing at a time. So they're going to have less of a range of interest. They just kind of want to focus on what they know, what they're comfortable with. They have difficulty connecting or relating because they really a lot of times don't want to play with other children. They prefer adults because they feel more comfortable with their energy, and they just don't like children, other kids. They don't want to play. They don't want to go outside. A lot of them prefer to be indoors. They don't want to play with toys, especially like not baby-ish toys, but they'll play with stuff that they could build and mimic their engineer mind, take things apart, put them back together. Take apart the remote, the vacuum. They might be really challenging in the house because they're constantly trying to find the electronics, and they're taking it apart and maybe putting it back together in a different way. Their minds they're constantly thinking. They're very left brain analytical. They can be socially awkward because, again, they're not really here to have the human experience. Well, none of the starseeds really are, but this particular group, they're socially awkward because they're not really here to blend. They're here on a job and they're focused on it, and so they're not going to try to blend in and be cool and fall for peer pressure, things like that. They lack social cues, but also sometimes they stand too close to each other or to somebody. They might be in your face. They don't understand space, adequate space between people. Sometimes they speak too loud. Sometimes they speak too low. They don't make eye contact, but for the different than the autistic group, and more because it's more distracting. So they find it distracting to look at somebody in the eyes because they get a flood of information about that person and their intentions, their behaviors, what they're feeling, all of these things. And they're just like, I don't want to deal with that. That's too much information for me. So it's a little bit different than the autistic group. They can be aggressive because they get frustrated, because many of them imagine being like having 17 master's degrees, coming back and spending a day with kindergartners, but you're the same age as them. But intellectually and in your wisdom, you already relate to those 17 masters and Pulitzer Prize winner and like all of these things. And then you got to spend the day with kindergartners in their developmental stage. Like they're just like, what? WTF? Like they get annoyed, they get frustrated, they don't have patience for that. They fidget a lot just because, like they just like sometimes they just don't know what to do with themselves. They got this energy, they got their brain is processing rapid fire a million times a minute, and like they just fidget, they move, so they do well when they have fidget spinners and all these things that they've developed for them. Compulsive behavior too, like they don't have the ability to like let the information filter through and reason. So sometimes they just compulsively act, and that can be challenging in the home environment because they're difficult to parent. Repetitive patterns, OCD, they have to do the same thing over. Remember I talked about the anchor. All these starseeds require some sort of an anchor to help them feel safe or stable. Excuse me. For those children with Asperger's, I feel like their anchor is stability. So, routine. They don't do well with change. If you're going to change things up or like, let's do this different today, or let's go to this new restaurant we haven't been to, like that's the end of the world for them. They don't want it. Like, what do you mean? I like it. I want to be at home. I don't like to go outside. I don't want new friends. They don't do well with change. They like repetitive schedules, and they do well with that. Whereas the autistic group that are more right-brained, like they actually prefer sometimes they can prefer spur of the moment, or they get bored easily. Like, I need something to do. Like, they're instant manifestors. Whereas those with Asperger's prefer, just one activity at a time. Keep it slow, not a lot of change, things like that. They can have poor coordination like the autistic group, but not as much, but they can have difficulties with sensory, or sometimes they might walk in a different way. Again, they're just they're just like the autistic but a different part of the spectrum, so they're more functioning, if we want to call it that, in certain ways. They can have heightened anger and anxiety, again, just like the autistic group as well. They have difficulty connecting with kids their age. I mentioned why. They're just very smart. They are sometimes off like genius level IQ. They are going to be the engineers of the future. They're going to the innovators, the architects. They are going to rebuild this world like we've never seen. They're out of the box thinkers in a different way than the autistic group. So how do you possibly group children all into one? I mean, there's so many different things that they can have, and variations to that might be on the milder side, moderate, or severe. So I'm offering the spiritual gift side to these things, and why they're having those challenges is important to talk about. Dyslexia. I think that I've discerned that dyslexia is a term that they used way early on, before they had the ability to like get more specific with autism and Asperger's. Like, I feel like dyslexia, a lot of children in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were labeled dyslexia. I was never labeled dyslexic, but I guarantee you I would have been if my mom took me to get diagnosed, because I resonate with a lot of the things in the dyslexia category. And that's more of like a learning disorder, brain disorder, development, a lot of different words. Many doctors will say it's inherited through genes, premature birth, low birth weight, exposure to substances in the womb, drugs and alcohol, things like that. So the things that we're dealing with here is the speed of processing. They're slow spoken, they're slow to speak, they have difficulty and challenges reading and writing. Again, a new wave of energy coming through. They're trying to learn how to they're trying to learn how to learn in 3D. So we're, where we come, where many starseeds out of 3D are very dynamic. You download information, you learn through doing. So when you come to this limited 3D where you got to read a book and memorize and take tests and listen to a teacher and focus for hours, and the fluorescent lighting, which actually distorts and disrupts our energy and our auric field, and through our eyesight and many other things, it can be very challenging for a high frequency starseed. Indigo, probably where most dyslexic were diagnosed or started with indigos, but still to today, we're just trying to figure out like how to focus and how to learn in this environment. This is all new to us. What do you mean we have to sit here and do math for an hour? Like that's torture. Why don't we just go out and do things that require math and we learn on the job? Poor concentration. It's not that we have poor concentration. It's that we are thinking too many things at the same time. Easily distracted. The noise, the kids running down the hallway and other classrooms, that's distracting. So it's harder to concentrate on one thing because we're so dynamic. We're thinking about a lot of different things at the same time. Difficulty following directions. Telling a child, okay, first do this, then do this, then do this. Sometimes it gets lost in translation. It goes through the brain, it gets filtered and processed differently. And then we forget and they're like, wait, what was first? What was second? Again, there's nothing wrong with the person. It's just the way in which they absorb information and regurgitate it. Sometimes it just gets distorted and it can be challenging to follow a system of orders if you have a difficulty processing the requests or the rules or the instructions. I think I mentioned this already, but delayed ability, like delayed reading or writing. Sometimes it's challenging to write because they haven't written before. They're not used to writing. Writing isn't done, by the way, in a lot of other worlds or a lot of other dimensions. They'll have ways of communicating, or maybe they'll draw, or they'll articulate, or there are frequencies embedded or codes within certain crystals or artwork or murals or things like that. But the way we write, one word at a time like that is just very hard for some starseeds to grasp the concept of it. So writing takes a long time. Sometimes the words can be flipped and rotated differently, and they appear like the B's or D's, and the same with numbers, writing the numbers backwards, same thing, same concept. Writing the numbers out is difficult for many starseeds to adopt that concept. So writing, things like that. Delays in learning, memorization, thinking, understanding. They can get headaches a lot because their poor brain is trying to process so much fast, like trying to figure out what's going on, and it causes density in the head and headaches. Speech impairment, things like that. So again, another category of starseeds getting thrown into the 3D, trying to figure out how to be and how to integrate can be challenging. We are a lot of dyslexic children are adults now, actually, and we got in trouble because we talked too much in class. We spoke out of turn. Couldn't wait, we were just so excited to share. We couldn't sit still, or we had trouble focusing. We were distracting the other children. And many of us now are writers, authors, public speakers, leaders in some way, and can be very productive members of society. But when we were children, we got in trouble quite often for it. So dyslexia, I feel like, is something we just gotta get out of there. I mean, all of these we need to go. All of these labels. ADHD is the last one I'm going to talk about, but there are others. But I think this is enough for one day. ADHD, much like dyslexia, I'm kind of coupling these two together because I feel like it's a spin-off of dyslexia that they started labeling more in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and then they added ADD, and then they added the H. So attention deficit disorder is just another level of dyslexia. You're having trouble concentrating. You can't sit still for 6 hours. It's hard for children to get lectured at, to read. You're reading the same paragraph 3 times and you just like don't know what you read. You're daydreaming about being outside and being in nature and playing. You don't want to sit here. So it's difficult to focus. There's too many, you're distracted by too many different things. Your mind is going a million miles a minute and you're daydreaming about so many other things, and you're just not interested, simply. And to put it very bluntly, you're bored. And like, I don't care about this right now. Why do I have to learn it? And back then we were just told, because, sit down or you'll get in trouble and then you get beat later by your parents probably. And so you just were beaten into submission, and then others were rebellious and went other routes. I was too scared, so I didn't rebel. But um, so the H, they added for the hyperactivity. So not everybody that has trouble focusing is hyperactive. Although today many are, and I believe that has a lot to do with, there's a negative side of the sugar and the diet, and all the other toxins and things. I can't say a lot of words, unfortunately, as you guys know, because there's a lot of people's channels being taken down, and so I have to be careful. But let's talk about the positive stuff. The starseeds that come in with ADHD, they are expansive. Their brains are working so fast. They're multidimensional. They're in and out of this reality, like actually traveling. They're bilocating. They're doing so many crazy things. So they can't sit still. The fluorescent lighting really bothers them. They fidget a lot. They talk a lot. They can't wait for their turn because they're so excited about what they want to say, what they want to share. They have impulse control, trouble with impulse control. They do things without thinking them through. Again, because the processing speed within their brain is just rapid fire, million times per second. So sometimes they can be socially awkward. They can have a hard time fitting in. They can be too aggressive, too hyperactive, where the other children, it makes them uncomfortable. They can't sit still for a long period of time. They can't focus. They have difficulty just concentrating. So again, a lot of these are overlapping with each other. But I feel for them. They shouldn't be sitting down. We're not designed, our bodies are not designed to sit in chairs for hours throughout the day, just so they could keep children away from the parents, so parents can work, and then they can work on the indoctrination of the children and programming. They cause the children to sit, memorize, study, focus, and take them away from the creative arts and the outside play and being in nature, being outside, sharing. What's the word? Imaginative play. How many times did we go outside and pretend we were pirates in the playground, and this was a ship, and whatever you're like, those things are invaluable. Our imagination is limitless, but in the school setting, it's limited. We are discouraged from thinking outside of the box. These children are discouraged from speaking when an idea comes in their mind, they want to say it right then. They're going to forget it in 3 minutes if they have to wait their turn. So like in their mind, they're like, no, I want to share this now. This is really cool. Don't you guys want to know what I'm thinking? So again, there has to be some structure. There has to be some way to create boundaries, of course, so it's safe for everybody. But we also need to understand and recognize the why. Why are these children exhibiting these behaviors? Why are they so frustrated? Why don't we allow them to share what they have, their thoughts and their and all of the things that they come in with that we haven't thought of yet. So that's why many people all around the world are looking to create alternative pathways, alternative educational opportunities, so that these children are not forced in a box, ridiculed, separated, medicated. I won't get into the medication part, but it does severely close off the soul from the body, and they just become a shell of themselves, and it causes even more behavioral issues, and they lose their life spark, their life essence. So you make your own decisions. I'm not promoting one way or the other, but that's just another way to look at it. So Aramis Creative Learning Center, that what we're trying to create, and many other homeschool initiatives all over the planet, all in different pockets of the world. Many people are trying to be ambassadors and find different ways so that we can support these children, so that they can thrive, and what they came in to do, we can nurture it as opposed to suppress it, so that we're not in the same situation generations from now, where we're still trying to fight this war spiritually, to evolve and to to evolve as a collective by working together. And instead we are, you know, I just feel like we're doing such a disservice to these children. They're so misunderstood. They are just, they're so suppressed, and they need to be nourished, and they need to be supported as much as possible. So that's all I'm going to say for today. I just wanted to give a little bit more in depth on these categories. I know there are many adults that are listening to this that probably fall into these categories, that have been like, yes, that was me, or yes, that's right. I resonate with that. And some of you might be listening and say she's full of it and this doesn't make any sense, and that's fine. You just don't have to listen to me. And you have your own, everyone has the right to their own opinion based on their perception and many other variables. But for those that do resonate with it, we can work together by not allowing the labels to be used, allowing our children to be who they are, and support them in the best ways that we can, and to create alternative experiences and educational opportunities for them where they can be themselves, where we can allow for children to learn through real life relatability, relatable activities, and being outside in nature. And then for those that want to be inside, you know, using their brain and intellect and creating and being innovative, and those engineers want to work their mind, then they do what they want to do. And everybody is able to, we facilitate an environment where children can be who they are and thrive in that environment, and we support them. We don't tell them what to do. We create a safe space, of course, and we are guardians of them, and we make sure it's safe, and we create boundaries so that there are some rules, but predominantly they are able to embrace those gifts, and they don't feel shy about them, and they can really just accelerate their psychic abilities, their knowings, their healing capabilities, their interdimensional abilities, their abilities to do grid working, to open portals, to activate, to do this, to do that. Everybody comes in with their roles and their unique characteristics for a reason. So we just need to try to support them as best we can. So I hope that this was helpful for all of you today. It was a lot. So thank you for paying attention this whole time and listening. And I hope this information found you all well. Until next time, I will see all of you guys again soon. Bye, everybody.